What's the difference between somebody that starts off and, as you said, that I'm going to work even harder, I'm going to prove myself? I'm sure over time that there's a point where you don't give a shit what somebody else's opinion is, that you're just proving things to yourself.
Being a pioneer in anything, you almost have this extra burden of proof. You have to prove, you have to do extra. I just knew that I wanted to be the best, and I was going to put my head down and do the work and make a success for myself.
Today I'm chatting with Carla Esparza. Carla's the current champion at UFC at 115 pounds. And also you won the belt years ago. You were one of the OG girls that really, led and pioneered the women's divisions at UFC. Were champion in the past, champion in the present, hopefully champion in the future. But how did you get started in, I know you have a strong wrestling background, but where did that come from, and how did you get started in MMA?
Well, someone just kind of suggested, like, hey, you're super strong for your size, you should try out wrestling. I just kind of went with the flow, went and tried it, and fell in love with wrestling, and kind of did martial arts in between just to mix it up a little bit, and, MMA just kind of fell into my lap.
Yeah? What was little Carla up to? What was your childhood like?
So I'm an only child, and
I am too.
Oh, I grew up in LA. Not the best neighborhood, but my dad worked super hard to kind of get me out of that and get me into a better school for high school, and it's kind of where I started wrestling. And from there, I just it changed my life. I was able to go to college on a wrestling scholarship, and fighting became my life.
Yeah. What were you studying in university?
I studied business with concentration in sports management. So I've always loved sports, and was hoping, I'd be involved with sports in my career one day.
I grew up in Illinois, but I was also only child. My father wasn't around for most of my childhood. He was busy building a drug empire the first part of my childhood, and busy in prison the second part of my childhood. So I lived with my mother primarily, and she wasn't the best caretaker or the best mother. So I had to sort of learn a lot of things about that. Learned a lot of interesting psychology things, watching her behavior around the household and having some realizations of that this woman's half crazy, and you're gonna have to figure a lot of things out for yourself, I felt like if I wanted to have better outcomes, you talked about your father helping to, worked very hard to get you in a better situation. Some of the early foundations of me thinking about how to make things better, how to solve problems, how to create better outcomes. And I wonder if there's an analog to get one of these belts. You have to do a whole lot of problem solving. You have to be a very good psychologist. You have to be very disciplined in your physical behaviors and what you eat and how you train and what you do. And there's layers and layers and layers of that a normal person wouldn't have the context to understand unless they lived a life like you have. What were some of the early foundations of your problem solving or thinking about how to overcome complex things to be the best in the world at something?
Well, to be honest, being one of the pioneers in the sport for women, there wasn't really this laid out, book, this is how to do it, this is your way to success. So a lot of it was just, improvising, thinking on the fly, just trying to make it work any way possible. And, there was trial and error a lot of times. You made mistakes. I would say that MMA back in the day wasn't this, cookie cutter sport where we had all this opportunity for here's your diet plan, here's your, here's this, these exercise programs. You just kind of had to figure it out. So for me, I did everything I could. I just worked as hard as I could. And, sometimes I made mistakes, but I try to learn from those, whether that was in nutrition or, training or anything. And I was fortunate to be one of the ones to lead the way. And now I feel that there is kind of more of a how to do it. And, I'd love to actually write my own book someday and, help the young kids, because I still feel like there's a lot of knowledge out there. People are kind of what do I do? Where do I go? There's so much that goes into being a champion and getting there. And I feel like a lot of it is being able to improvise and, not only being able to survive in the chaos, but being able to thrive in it.
Let's unpack a few layers, just on a fight week. So I was at your last fight. I was in the front row when you got this belt. I was really excited about that. On a fight week, and you know much better than me, but my perception of this, that, after, a decade plus of training, 20 years of training, after that, the physical fitness parts of, having the, muscle, not having too much muscle if you want to maintain a particular weight. So, for a normal person out there, think, oh, more muscle is better. Well, more muscle can affect your cardio. More muscle might put you in a different weight group that you don't want to be in. So you might have to limit some behaviors that you don't want to be too bulky. And I'm speaking beyond my expertise. I'm speaking into your expertise. So let me give the novice take, and then I'd like to hear the professional take. But so, I imagine there's a lot of things that a person has to be careful about. That you want to maintain your physique in a certain way. You have to practice and have keep your skills that you've developed forever. You have to keep those sharp. Just keep learning new things in MMA because the sport has advanced tremendously. And in a decade's time, the sport's advanced a lot. Where things that would have took to be a champion 10 years, 20 years ago wouldn't be a top contender anymore. So you had to learn a lot of new things along the way. Then in a fight week, so you have weight cut, you have to be dehydrated. That's the worst part for me when I think of all the things. More scary than fighting maybe is I'd be miserable being dehydrated, hungry, and then you got to go do media stuff. Go smile for the camera, go do the press conferences, official weigh-ins, ceremonial weigh-ins. Deal with coaches, et cetera, et cetera. There's probably a few things that I'm missing, but that's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of things going on there that you don't get to just chill and relax the week before your big event,
Yeah, for sure. I think all of the weight cutting, the media, all these things are kind of the price that you pay to be on the highest level. There are certain sports, like, for example, wrestling, where I came from, where there's not really that many people paying attention, and it's you don't have that many media obligations, but almost like you wish you did, because that'd bring more attention to the sport, more eyes on the sport, and, in turn, that can monetize it as well. So definitely for fighting, weight cutting can definitely make things difficult. And I would have to say that's the worst part of the sport, hands down for everyone. I think, you were mentioning that, you don't want to put on too much muscle, and, you have to find your correct weight class. And it's definitely a trial and error over the years. Especially when you're younger, the weight might come off a lot easier. And as you're putting your body through these constant weight cuts, it kind of doesn't want to perform for you anymore the same way, and the weight doesn't come off as easy. So it becomes more of a science, I think. You have to be so precise with your diet and timing of the weight cut and timing of when you need to be a certain weight each week. I need to lose 1.5 pounds this week and for this next week. And if you're not there, you need to kind of make adjustments in your diet. And then, no matter what, though, when you show up to fight week and you have to do that water weight cut and, dehydrate yourself, that definitely is not fun.
And then go speak to the media, and then sign out posters, and then go sign autographs.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then just moving around the city, whatever, and in a different city, maybe in a different country than you're used to.
Yeah, most definitely. Definitely fighting outside of your own country is you're adjusting to the time, and you've gotten this super long flight, and they might not even have food that you're familiar with. They're like, all we have for you is borscht and these sardines, and you're like, what do I do with this? So it definitely can make it interesting fight week.
I think that'd be challenging. And maybe the last one, then if you move around the city, then you have a bunch of media promotion there. So then you can't even move around freely. While you're changing time zones, while you're dehydrated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and on your way to an obligation. Hey, stop and take a photo with my kids.
Yeah, but you know what? For me, it's, even though you're not feeling the best, you always kind of want to show up for the fans, because they're so excited to see you and they love the sport. It kind of gives you this extra energy. It makes you happy, okay, these guys love what I do. They're inspired by, everything that we do. It kind of gives you that extra boost, and I get happy to see the fans and take pictures and stuff. But definitely inside you can be I'm dying inside. I'm so hungry or thirsty.
I've thought about this from a business perspective because that's kind of how I think about a lot of things. And I'm like, there's probably, I don't have somebody specific in mind, but inevitably I would think there's numerous fighters over time that they're trying to make a name for themselves. They need to perform good in their fight consistently. And about the time they start getting some attention from the public, or invited to meet and greets or signings or things like that, that those are things that would help advance their career or create more of a public image or public awareness of them. And some of the same things that would help them be better known and better compensated are some of the other things that might distract them from their best performance on fight night. And I imagine that's a balance that somebody has to walk to. You want to have a positive public image. You want to have a large positive public image. Your compensation through not just from the organization itself, but also through endorsements or whatnot is going to be associated with that. But then you also need to be well rested and have your mind in the right place to be the best athlete or have the best performance that you could have on the big day.
Yeah, most definitely during fight week, it would be nice to just be able to rest all week and eat your meals and train a little and then just go into the fight with no media. But, it's those media obligations that kind of bring that attention to the sport. So it's a necessity, but it doesn't mean it's easy. So, you do it and you're just running on little sleep. But at the end of the day, every champion has to do it. Everyone on the highest level is doing this thing. So you're kind of on this even playing field. And I think that's where the mental side comes into it, because, you almost have to just grit through all these things and still perform at your best. But that's just the name of the game. And I don't think people would be at the top and having to do that media if they weren't already mentally strong.
Gotcha. What was wrestling like when you were first starting? I'm thinking to a conversation I had with Misha Tate where she was saying that there weren't a lot of women wrestling. At the time that she started wrestling, there weren't a ton of women doing that. It was kind of a rare thing. And, she had, she felt that she was in an environment where she kind of had to prove herself and beat up a couple of the boys, so to speak. And I'm saying that very loosely, but she had to prove her skill set and her commitment. And then was very well accepted and respected within the early stage wrestling. But what was that like in your life from high school or college?
Wrestling in high school on the boys team was definitely a challenge. You're showing up and everyone's already expecting you to fail, expecting you to quit, or expecting you to ask for special treatment. So if anything, that motivated me to push even harder. I was like, if they're asking me or if they're expecting me to quit, or I'm going to work even harder than they do. I'm going to show up earlier than they do. And when there's a technique, I'm not going to walk, I'm going to run, because I have more to prove than they do. But at the end of the day, I think after you continually prove yourself, I think you gain people's respect, and then you're on a different level. And I think that's how I was able to be a leader on my team and able to get that All-American status in high school.
You're All-American wrestler in high school?
Yeah, I was a two-time All-American in high school. I wrestled 2 years.
Once wasn't enough, twice.
And then I was an All-American in college as well.
All right, twice wasn't enough. You hear that? What's the difference between, there's other women that were, I presume, I don't know. I imagine there are other women that were interested in wrestling that, what's the difference between somebody that starts off and, as you said, that I'm going to work even harder, I'm going to prove myself, to others? I'm sure over time that there's a point where you don't give a shit what somebody else's opinion is, that you're just proving things to yourself. That you're I'm much more concerned about my own opinion than a stranger's opinion about almost everything.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel that being a pioneer in anything, you almost have this extra burden of proof. You have to prove, you have to do extra. And it just was expected. I didn't care what anybody thought. I just knew that I wanted to be the best, and I was going to put my head down and do the work and make a success for myself. But fortunately, the new breed, the new generations now, they don't have as much to prove. They're already accepted when they walk in. So many people like myself have walked the footsteps, walked the path before them, and proven that women, that females can do this, that they can succeed. So yeah, fortunately, I think I feel happy with what I was able to do and the other pioneers, and female wrestling and women's MMA, because now they can walk into a room and people are happy to have them there and, treat them as equals.
Did you come to UFC from the beginning of your career, or where did your pro career start?
So I I fought for about 5 or 6 years before the women were let into the UFC in my division. I was the first UFC strawweight champion, so it was basically like the start of the division.
So what were you doing before? You said 5 or 6 years you were in other organizations? Is it Invicta or something else?
Yeah. So
I don't know that part of my fight history.
Yeah. So I fought a couple of fights, just local shows. It was like, hey, we have a fight in a week. Can you do it? Okay, I'm in. Let's do it. I just fought wherever the opportunity was, wherever I could find an opportunity to fight. And I was able to fight Megumi Fuji and Bellator. My fourth fight, she was 20-0, and I was 3-0 going into that fight. She was a pound-for-pound best female fighter in the world, and that was...
So no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. And it was the first and only female tournament that Bellator put on, and I was able to be the first fight in that. And from there, I went on to Invicta and became their first strawweight champion.
Okay, so you're the first strawweight champion at Invicta, and then also over at UFC.
Yes, correct.
That's amazing. Quite literally a pioneer of, in terms of wrestling, in terms of, MMA. What are some of those experiences like? Or what was the thought, the evolution of your thought, perhaps, going through those experiences of doing things that other women never did before and doing them at such a high level?
It was so crazy when we first started in the sport. Like, it was just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of doing it for fun. I think we were being paid like a couple $100. So you just kind of like, well, I love this sport. I'm going to do it as long as I can because there's no money in the sport. If anything, you're losing money in training camp. Mm-hmm. You're living in your mom's house, or, sleeping on couches or whatever. I was commuting like an hour, hour and a half to training. Every time I fought, basically the money went to the gas in my car to fill it up. It's just like so many sacrifices. You don't get to go out and have fun and do things. It's just like, let me do anything I can to like just be able to continue to keep training. And fortunately, there was a lot of sponsors back in the day that were just like, they understood like what we were doing and that we were like putting our everything into this, and they wanted to help support us so that we could like continue to train and continue to fight. So back in the day, we had like, you had the fight kits and the patches, and we had like these huge fight banners you'd walk out with, and they'd have all your sponsors on it. I kind of miss that like old school part of the sport, it just felt so like OG, like legit, Now it feels so uniform with just like everyone's wearing the same thing. I felt like back in the day, there was definitely a lot more like uniqueness to it. Like you got to express your personality more. Like, I'm gonna wear like a hot pink, and some people wore like weird things on their outfits, or some people wore like, I got to wear a wrestling singlet. When I was in Invicta, actually, I really wanted to represent my wrestling side, so I would wear like a wrestling singlet. And I think I was like the first one to really do that, and I felt that I was like, I'm gonna represent for wrestling. I'm gonna like, this is my expression of myself, and I want people to know like, this is my wrestling side. And that let them know that the takedown was coming, but I think if they watched any of my fights, they already knew that was coming anyway.
Yeah, I remember some of those old, fight patches that have the little logos or whatnot, and some of them were just random. It'd be like some random tattoo shop or like mufflers or something. But Jake Shields is my main coach that's helped me with some MMA.
Yeah.
And he told me he had like a sponsor that was like a transmission shop. And he's like, I don't know if I ever helped those guys sell any transmissions, but I think they just liked me, and
Yeah.
So some of them were just kind of random fans or people that wanted to be, part of the action or feel part of it,
And that's always the cool part, that you get to wear these things, but you're also like in the cage and you're wearing like their logo, and it was cool because it kind of made people really feel a part of what you were doing. So it was cool. I can't remember like the weirdest sponsors I've had. I had Alienware, so we had like the gaming company. We had let me see, I think I had like some rims company. I never got any rims for my car, but that's okay because I had like a bucket anyway, so I don't think that would have looked cool. We had so many sponsors. I remember back in the day, they even had like Condom Depot sponsoring the UFC and like just like the most random sponsors. But like we were saying, it's just like these people who like love fighting and they want to support you and they see how much you're putting into your dream and like how intense you train. And if you know anything about like the sport, our training camp is probably like no other sport. It's very intense and, you're training 2-3 times a day. You're literally getting beat up like every day.
I never started anything in MMA till I was 42 when I started training. And I learned things quickly. And I'm not good at having hobbies. That if I do something, I kind of do it a lot and my brain obsesses about things. So I'm either very focused on something or I'm probably not doing it at all.
Yeah.
So that's been very good for me in business. And I've been laughing at myself and thinking about my life a bit recently that I'm like, oh, like you worked really hard, so you were supposed to like relax a little more, like in your 40s or 50s or something. And I'm like, oh, well, what would be like fun and relaxing? I'm like, oh, like let me learn how to like, let me go get a multi-time world champion boxer to help me with my boxing. And
yeah, no big
let me
deal.
get a couple guys to help me with kickboxing. They were, also world champion, Henry Hooft and Dewey
learning
Cooper,
from the best.
if you know those guys.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I know Jake for several years. Like, I took Jake to dinner and said, hey, will you come help me with, jiu-jitsu and, general MMA stuff.
Jake was actually one of the tough coaches. He wasn't on my tough coach team, but he was on Gilbert Melendez's team. I actually originally wanted to be on Gilbert's team and have Gilbert and Jake as some of my coaches. Like they're awesome. I was happy with Coach Pettis and all their squad as well. But it was cool to have Nate Diaz on there and everyone.
Shout out to Gilbert. I know Gilbert. I've met Nate before, but I know Gilbert. We've done an interview like this in the past, and he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty sharp. He's a good communicator. So he had an announcing or like an ESPN type gig for a while, and he's a good communicator.
I remember Gilbert was announcing for a bit. I've never done any announcing, but I could imagine it's a little scary, like the public speaking and having a,
Yeah,
speak
it's
on the
interesting
fly.
that I've chatted with John Anik and Biz Bing and DC and some of the people that are doing the Paul Felder.
Yeah.
And I think John Anik is the best. He won't disagree or won't hurt his feelings if I say that, but I think John Anik is the best announcer or the best commentator.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
And that's a skill. That's a different skill set that a person has to. You have to know quite a lot about the sport. You have to know quite a lot about the fighters. These guys do a lot of prep work. Probably you know that, but some of them are doing 20, 30 hours of prep work before.
Oh my gosh.
If there's a 15 fight card, and they have to know, 30 people and be able to talk about them. Then they have to have the short version or the long version, depending, because some fights are going to end in 2 minutes and some fights are going to end in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So they have to have the short version, the long version to be able to fill space, get the endorsement announcements in and whatever other promotional things. And so it's you can't be a dummy and do that job.
Yeah, most definitely. It's so funny. You really do have to study. Not only do you have to know about the fighters themselves, but you have to know the actual techniques and what's going on in the fight. Because if you're coming straight from basketball or hockey, and then you're just oh yeah, Jake got him with that one punch or that one spinning move. It's definitely you have to know a lot and study. And I think it'd be really fun, but I'd definitely be nervous to jump on camera and mix up names or whatever, or moves or
If you focused your brain on it, I'm sure you'd do great at it. That you're very attentive and conscientious and detail-oriented in other ways. If you refocused your energy on that, I'm sure you'd be fantastic at it.
Hey guys, my name is Caleb, and I have completed the Moneyberg Real Estate Riches program. A couple of bullet points that stood out to me was the cash for keys. That threw me off. That was actually something that possibly would have helped me out. We were having issues getting the guys evicted out of there, and I think cash for keys would have been a great idea to keep the house and get them out. That was definitely a good thing for me to look into. To anybody who's thinking of getting expert advice on real estate, this program's great. It's very diverse. The program was fantastic and was probably my favorite of the Trinity. So thank you guys very much.